tonight. I am with Scott Vanderpool, 2011-2019 finalist, as well as the 2023 preseason Wooden Award winner for the Fantasy League. Welcome back to the program, Scott.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually my executive summary of my LinkedIn profile. So I appreciate that.
It's been a while since you've been on the pod. I tried to get you on kind of like in the middle of the summer, and then like so much of like trying to record a podcast is timing, like in relation to the league and stuff. But I'm glad I finally got you on. I've been wanting to jump into baseball stuff with you for a while. And I'm super pumped that you're going to be in New Orleans for the auction, which should be a really good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, like, we just got back from like holidays, and like you're probably one of the best traveled people in the league. But I was kind of wondering, like, where you've been recently, and if you went anywhere for like the holidays with your kids.
Christmas itself was here in Colorado. I had a wedding I needed to go to in the Yucatan, so did that New Year's time period. And then Anna had just turned 40, so actually just yesterday got back from Cayman Islands
Oh,
for a
wow.
quick little 4-day kind of MLK Day weekend with her. So
Sweet.
yeah, sounds posh.
Nice.
It's more
Yeah,
posh.
very posh. Very posh, I would say. Yeah,
All this
I
stuff.
shared a couple pictures of mine in Monterey, and it was really cool. I don't know if you spent any time there in kind of central California, and obviously this was before all the fires and stuff.
I haven't made it to Monterey. That's definitely on my bucket list. I've made it because that road is washed out part of the way, so you have to go like north and then come back south, I believe it is. So I've never made it all the way to kind of Big Sur proper in that neck of the woods, but spent some time in Central California. Beautiful, beautiful part of the state, beautiful part of the country for sure.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like I had never been to kind of that part. Like I've been to San Diego, LA, and San Francisco before, and obviously for Rob's wedding, we were a little further north. But yeah, it was really nice to be like we were literally right on the beach. And so I would definitely recommend. It's actually a really good spot. I would say for families. Like the area we were in, there's a bunch of condos, yeah, right there on the beach, and then there's like a community like full court basketball hoops, batting cages, tennis courts, like pool and all that sort of stuff that was on the premises. So it was like I was like kind of in the back of my head. I was like, this would be a really cool place to go, like in a warmer period of time with like a group. Like I wouldn't even like remove it from like an auction trip if we wanted to, but that would be
Yeah.
like a very special thing. But yeah, it was really cool. I didn't realize the one thing that I realized like kind of driving through, because we flew into San Francisco, is just how much farmland there is in California. Like I always forget that part. You always think about all the big cities.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of farmland that we drove through getting there.
Yeah, it is. So it makes a good wine country too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So like I think I've rambled long enough about stuff, but we got to take care of some business here, man. So we adding 4 inches of dong or 4 inches of height this year.
Yeah, every year it gets even more annoying to be tall. So I'm gonna have to, I think 4 for 4, quadruple down on dong. I was in when I was in Mexico. I bought this kind of cool linen shirt. That of course nothing off the rack, even in the U.S. Fits me, but let alone a Mexican kind of linen shirt. So it's typical like sleeves up to here. I have to roll them up to make it look like it was intentional. So yeah, it's just not at a certain point. It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
I feel like having I don't know how many. If this is a cumulative addition of dong size, that'd be 16 inches of dong. That'd probably be pretty unmanageable too. So who knows? I probably just stick with what I got in both packages.
Yeah. I have a feeling I'm going to revisit this whole dong thing or 4 inches thing during the rapid fire question segment that we have. Yeah, we'll hold off on that and move into what your thoughts were on the IU football and thus far the basketball season. Obviously, we've heard a lot from Trent and Tim with their new podcast, Kirkwood and Dunn, which is it's been really good. I don't know how many you've listened to, but I've been really, really impressed.
I haven't listened yet. I've been pretty busy with work and things outside of work. The wedding I went to was also an Indian wedding. It was my cousin's wedding. I was the best man, so
Oh, wow.
I had to do like an Indian. I had to prepare all this stuff for the best men, like a Sangeet dance, and like
Holy
choreography.
shit.
Do the choreography for it. I had to prepare like a speech. It was much more than your average wedding. Um, I had to do all these like things. I got this like I was part of the Hindu ceremony where I had to like trade the other family some um, jewels in exchange for Bob, my cousin. Like here, have some jewels. So there was a lot that went into it. It was much more preparation than your average wedding. I and I mean, I'm very interested. I definitely was early on the IU football bug this year. I was hyped coming into the season, and I have friends actually two doors down from me. In my neighbor, in my little townhouse area here in Denver, is an Indiana grad. I didn't even know he went to Indiana until we bumped into each other in Vegas a couple of years back when Indiana played Arizona in Vegas, and we were both there. I'm like, dude, aren't you my neighbor? Um, and he was wearing candy stripes. But I was trying to hype him on IU football early on, like preseason. I was like, there's something unique here. The type of talent that Signetti was bringing in, and just the production. Like so, you look at our wide receiver core this last year, so many catches, so many yards. He went into it with what looked like a clear plan, and I feel like we've seen this 100 times before, but it just seemed much more legitimate heading into the season. And the bravado was just so cool, right? That um, the Purdue sucks, so does Ohio State, so does Michigan. I mean, all that kind of stuff just got me hyped. And to be honest, I mean, I know we give Rob a hard time about it, but you looked at the schedule coming into this year, like this is a very winnable schedule. It's we are a pretty damn good team, or we're a pretty damn good team, but we also avoided some major landmines with no Oregon, no Ohio, no no Wisconsin's, no Penn State, kind of some tripwires. We got Michigan on a bad year, or a down year. I mean, obviously they're pretty good if they beat Ohio State and Alabama, but we got Washington in a little bit of a down year. So all the stars kind of aligned, and I do think he knows how to coach football very, very well. You just saw things, I count the number of missed tackles you saw this year. The small things, our blocking was excellent. Our offensive line was really good. Um, Defensive line was excellent. And guys who just had production there too last year, like CJ West, Kamara. This year coming in, we have this guy from Texas State, and a guy from I think Western Kentucky, or one of those directional Kentucky states, but same kind of gist. Big guys who have excelled at smaller programs going to come in. And I think, keep in mind, next year we have Kamara coming back. We have D'Angelo Pons coming back at cornerback. We have Aiden Fisher coming back in linebacker. So we have kind of core studs on the line, in the linebacker position, in the D-back spots. Just defense should be really, really good. It looks like we've augmented some things, in really all those spots too, to help out. So on the defensive side of the football, I think we're going to be, really solid. Again, if you look at our schedule next year too, it's a little bit of that. Like we've avoided some landmines. I don't have the schedule memorized, but I remember taking a peek and like, okay, we're going to win.
We can run it back.
We're gonna do pretty well. Like I was given shit with Timmy game one of the season. I was like, dude, this is serious. Like, buy your bowl game tickets. I joked about him. I have the text. I will pull up the receipts. I was like, we need to save our keep January 1st free. And he was like, see when I believe it when it's not a Conference USA team. Lo and behold, I think we're bowl material every year, from here on out. I want to see us at least be Kansas State, Iowa type of, perennial top 16 team. I don't expect us to make the football playoffs every year, but I mean, I will say this as an Indiana fan who's largely hasn't cared about football aside from, the Antoine Randall years. Very casual, very, very casual fan. Couldn't
Yeah.
have named a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman any year in the past. Um, this year, dude, it's so much more fun being a football school than a basketball school. Not that we're even a basketball school anymore, which
Yeah.
brings it to that side of the Indiana campus, which is just a horrific season. I mean, the record, I think if a casual fan starts to look at it, they're like, oh, this isn't a horrible year. But you just start to see these losses pile up. Woodson is 0-5 against Northwestern in his career,
I
Murphy.
saw that. It's like
It's
100 years since that happened or something like
it's
that.
disgusting. I mean,
Yeah.
um, we some god awful record versus Nebraska. Maybe he has one win versus Nebraska. I should have done more research and less time, eating ramen before this. But really bad. And I like Mike Woodson as a human. I respect him as a player. I want him to go down as a legend. I think this is a cautionary tale for so many programs. Don't hire a legend just because they're a legend. All it's going to do is put you in this really weird position. I want him to retire with some dignity. We move on. He moves on. He goes back to being the Indiana legend he is. And, we find the right coach, the Kurt Signetti of basketball. And part of the problem this year in particular, the malaise that's come over basketball for me is that you just look in the football field and it's like, okay, we have the absolute right coach at the helm. What the hell is going on with basketball? And I've been kind of a Woodson
Apologist.
not apologist, but I've been a fan. I mean, he's done some,
Yeah.
for a while, it's like he could recruit. He kept Trace Jackson Davis. He, brought Khalil Ware in. He, can bring folks into the portal, but he just plays a 1990s style basketball with like two big men. We don't shoot threes. We can't defend threes. Um, I haven't paid this little attention to Indiana basketball as I have this year. I didn't miss any football games. I was rabid football fan, and this year it's kind of like the roles are reversed. And I'm like, yeah, if there's a game on, I'll watch it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to, watch us get beaten for the fifth time by Northwestern. It's fucking pathetic. So we have to make changes. Like, and I think we need to do it in season. We need to do it soon. There's no point in waiting. There's no, you know, Woodson kind of came into this year knowing that his offensive philosophy is going to have to change if he wants to stay with the times, right? We didn't get Braylon Mullins. We lost out on what's Liam McNeely, right? Two heavy 3-point shooters that I don't know what all went into it, but you just look at the style of offense that we run. Another stat I saw is that he's like, God, I should have done more prep. Like 0 for 31 on top 100 guards that we've pursued.
Mm-hmm.
0 for 31 on guards. We're Indiana. I mean, it's like it should be like how many Matt Roths and Nick Zeisloffs are there that can just shoot threes because this is what you do at Indiana. Just some of those one-dimensional guys.
I was gonna say they used to be all across the state. Apparently, we can't get any of them.
They just go to UConn now. I mean, that's the problem. It's like we need to totally change the perception, totally change the dynamic. And he had a chance to correct it in the beginning of the year when we knew things weren't looking good, and we just haven't. So I don't know. Not much more to say there. That I'm sure the kind folks on the Kirkwood and Dunn podcast haven't said. Shout out to those sponsors, but it's pathetic, and things have to change 100%, and it's got to change now. Get some momentum heading into the next season. You can make very, very quick, assertive changes with the transfer portal, and we have such a stockpile of NIL money. It's still Indiana basketball, but we got to make some moves, undoubtedly.
Yeah, and they I didn't realize that Trent and Tim are going to transition into from football to basketball. They have done, I think, a couple podcasts on basketball, and from what I've seen on Twitter, I think a lot of people agree with you, like especially with the Woodson comparison or Woodson analysis. Like, hey, legend, but let's kind of move on with this because it just doesn't look good.
Everything about him is getting tarnished. I've been a Peaks member for 19 years. That's one bit of research I did today. and it's unanimous on Peaks. And by the way, I used to just skip through all, the Friday in the locker room comes out that Rab Johns does. I used to skip through the football stuff and go right to the basketball stuff. Now it's the other way around. I don't fucking care about the basketball stuff. Any recruit that commits tomorrow from Eastern Europe is, who knows if he's going to stay committed, which is something that might be in the works. But after the year, because there's just zero chance Woodson makes it to the end of the year. So what's the point? Let's make moves now. Get me excited. Get me back on Peaks as a basketball junkie and not just a football junkie.
Who would you have as the interim coach?
I think interim coach, you could have any of the assistants do it. I mean, I'm just looking at it, you could have Kenya Hunter do it. I mean, I don't think any of those guys are head coach chops yet. I don't know. I mean, they just seem very, very recruiting driven, which is great. What you want from an assistant coach. I just, there doesn't seem like there's anyone really waiting in the wings to naturally assume it long term. So it just means in an interim season where I don't really care what the outcome of the season is, somebody to just stumble through the finish line. It'd be nice to make the tournament, but I mean, so many people on Peaks, I think, are actively just rooting against Woodson just to get this nightmare over with. And it's not pretty. It's just not pretty on Peaks, man. It's 100% unanimous. Like, this has to end. Now, Peaks is a particularly sour bunch of folks.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's like professional wrestling fans that it's a very niche audience. It's like very, very into the niche. So and they're usually very cynical.
If you look at the comments on like Inside the Hall, which is a little bit more of a moderate crowd, still, basketball junkies, but it's a little bit more lighthearted, but it's one way or another. The proof is in the pudding.
So I'm gonna shift gears here, a little bit more traveling. And I'll switch it around. Since you're so well traveled, what would you like? Anyone listening to this, watching this, however you're consuming it, if you had like 3 or 4 nights, where would you go? And I'm talking about like you and maybe your spouse or girlfriend or whoever's listening. Like, what's a spot that you would recommend right now?
Yeah, I generally, my first travel recommendation wouldn't be to travel with your spouse and your girlfriend at the same time. That
of course.
I mean, I have 2 kids, 8 and 5, so my perspective's a little bit unique. This isn't a 3 or 4 day location, but just to give you a little bit of insight on like the kind of trips that they really like. Last year, we went to Egypt. I just started scuba diving in COVID. And have kind of become like an avid scuba diver now. And so the scuba's really good in the Red Sea, and got pretty cheap, inexpensive flights from London down to Egypt. So did that last year. Kids loved it because it's a little bit of beach. Nobody in our family is really a beach hound where they just want to spend, day after day after day at beach pool. But that was great because you could do a little bit of beach, then, shift the dynamic of the trip over to see, pyramids and things like that. And the kids just loved that, every element of that trip. So anything that has that sort of mix into it. Now, 3 or 4 days, it's kind of hard to do. I would say, I was not anticipating saying this question when you kind of gave me the agenda earlier today, but, don't sleep on the United States with our share of, pre-Columbian ruins, right? Mesa Verde National Park down here in Colorado. Bandelier National Monument, New Mexico. I love New Mexico.
New Mexico is beautiful.
It's beautiful. It has its own culture, that's just wildly unique. It's got tons of ruins, kind of ancestral Puebloan people ruins. A lot that I haven't been to, like Chaco Canyon, I really, really want to go to. That's a tough place to get to because it's just on that 4, corners part where there's no direct flights. It's probably a 8-hour drive from Denver. But New Mexico, I would never ever sleep on. I love that state. It's just got so much between the desert, the ruins, the mountains, and the high elevation stuff. It's just got a lot there. I think Albuquerque is going to be one of those cities that is like the next Boise or Austin or Salt Lake. It's not stunningly beautiful like maybe Salt Lake or Colorado Springs is, but it's very, very pretty city. and I just think it's about to boom real estate wise.
Uh, They have like a really cool hot air balloon festival in that area too, I
I always
think.
want to go there. Yeah.
Yeah. Second travel question. This one's a little more straightforward. So for next year's auction, I mentioned the WBC is going to be in Miami and Houston. I know you've spent a lot of time in Houston, but like, what would you suggest or make a recommendation to the group? Because it's something that we'll probably vote on in New Orleans.
Um, yeah, I mean, I lived in Houston for 9 years, a big Houston fan. I like Miami too. You're not going to go wrong with either. I will say, somebody jokingly put in the chat, like, what are we going to go to Detroit? And I mean, I think some of those
I
unconvinced,
don't hate
honestly,
Detroit.
I've been technically, like, I've been to a Tigers game, but it was just a very in and out thing. I wouldn't say I've
Yeah.
been to Detroit, honestly. I would totally do something like Detroit. Maybe in one of those off years, right, where it's like a
Yeah.
what do we do? The bigger stuff in the odd years and the smaller locations.
Yeah, it's kind of gotten mixed up a little bit, but yeah, and like I'll say because it is good. It's still going to be kind of cold in Detroit, but like the downtown area is very walkable. There's a lot of bars. There's a lot of stuff to do. Obviously, like there are parts that you want to stay away from, but we wouldn't be in those parts anyway. And like comparatively, it's like relatively cheap. I think for a lot of folks, easy to drive through, and like Detroit's a pretty big hub, so like I feel pretty comfortable that people will be able to get there. So like, yeah, I think Rob said that, and I was like, Detroit's actually like
I
for
would
like
totally,
that smaller group. I told BJ like I would be totally down with Detroit. Um,
yeah, me
so
too. I mean,
yeah,
it's I'm in my 40s. I've gone through like bachelor parties, 30th birthdays, conferences. It's like I don't need to go to Nashville another time, or
yes, agreed.
Vegas. I like those
Yeah.
places, but I'd rather go to some place where like I haven't been to Detroit.
Yeah, but yeah, you just want to get some familiarity with it. Yeah, like in like in like that weekend's perfect because you're like kind of in and out. Like if you hate it, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
We like half of the trip is like planned anyway between the auction and the dinner. So I agree.
we're not talking about buying an apartment building. We're just talking about one for a week.
Right.
Um, so on that same vein, I mean, again, I'm biased because I lived there for 9 years, but Houston has a lot of those same, like, if you don't find an excuse to go, you're not going to go, and it's an amazing food city. It's the most diverse city in the country now. So give it a shot. Especially I can show a lot of people around. If you're especially, I'm assuming they're playing at Minute Maid, or whatever the hell
Yeah.
it's called now. Um, which is right downtown. I mean, there's a train line that goes downtown all the way to basically like, you know, the football stadium. Not that we'd ever go there, but it basically goes through the museum district, Rice University area, goes through the Med Center, goes through Midtown. Like you can easily survive Houston without a car, um, for sure. So I mean, I'd advocate it more than you might think.
Yeah, and I've never been to Houston, so I'm very intrigued. Like I've heard like good things. Same thing with the downtown, and frankly, I haven't really spent more than a day in Miami. So, but I'm pretty intrigued with Houston. I think that would be a really fun place to go for the group. They kind of offer different things, but yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever choice it is. Like I'll probably choose Houston, but if it's Miami, I certainly won't be disappointed.
Same, yeah. I mean, I'd be pumped about Miami either way, but yeah, don't sleep on Houston. Give it a chance, and you'll have a good time for sure. I mean, if you want to go to the beach, we can head down to Galveston and swim in that water that Charles Barkley makes fun of. But
Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into a new segment here. This is rapid fire questions. I've got 13 questions. Some of these are really short. Some of these are more of a long choose your adventure. There's no sort of like got you or anything like that. Like, I don't think you'll be offended. You might be off put by one of the questions, but just for fun, just some random shit that I made up. So we're just going to go for it. So first rapid fire question is probably the shortest. Pizza or wings?
pizza for sure.
Pizza. Okay. So
More
the
than
second question is
deep fried.
probably the longest.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the choose your adventure. So I want to take you back in time. You're going to be a senior in high school, right? So that's what, 22 years ago? And rather than, giving you some dong inches, we're going to give you some height. You're going to be 6'10". All right. And we're going to make your dreams come true. You are a heavily recruited basketball. This is, I think it's like the 02. 02 was your class year, like coming out?
01.
01. Okay. So you are the 57th recruit in the country. You are going to go on, and actually, you're going to be kind of ahead of your time. You're actually going to be a bit of a three-point shooter in college. And you're going to win a national championship during this time period. After college, you're going to go on to have kind of a journeyman career in the NBA. You're going to be the very last pick of the NBA draft. And you're going to accrue or accumulate, however you want to look at it, $20 million over the course of your career. So not too bad. The downside of this door number one is that you went to Marquette University and your roommate was Rob Crabbe. So that's door number one. Door number two, same year, we're making you a little taller. You're like 6'6" now. But rather than becoming an NBA player, because you weren't like anything special, you are going to become the greatest handball player of all time. You are going to be wildly famous in Northern Europe and France. But no one in the States will know who the fuck you are. So, and the money it's not quite the same, but you're going to make $9 million over the course of your 20-year career.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of curious, what would you choose between those two?
So, that's a really interesting. Hey, Smash. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Just got some cookie delivered to me by my DoorDash 6-year-old here. I'm a 5-year-old. Yeah, I know, but you're almost 6. Okay, love you, big guy. Interesting. I mean, I wouldn't think the Marquette or Crabbe part matters a ton in either direction. No offense, Crabbe. I think you're looking 20 million, some notoriety, right? Some. The average person.
Yeah.
Although
you're a legend in Wisconsin.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when I lived in Indianapolis for a summer, I ran into Scott Pollard at a bar with just a flock of babes. I also ran into Ron Artest at a what is the place with burritos as big as your head? Anyways, they have one of those in Indianapolis. Ran into him there. That flock of babes was something. Although I guess you'd have your fair share of flock of babes in the Benelux, France country too, right? So,
yeah, the Scandinavians love you, man.
Yeah, I don't know anything about handball. I'm assuming I have some rotator cuff problems after it's all said and done.
And when I say you're like the best of all time, you are literally identified as the GOAT by anyone that asks this question.
Really? Okay, so I'm the GOAT. But I could live. I have a house over there. Go get my GOAT status. Have the wee on the PP. Come back here and just be a normal Joe like John Stockton going to 1992 Olympics.
You could theoretically do that. Yeah, you would have anonymity here, and then you could go back there whenever you need the ego boost.
And assume there's no additional residual revenue coming from Wheaties boxes.
I mean. But that's the thing. Once you're a professional athlete and you're like that status, you're always getting something. Like if you want a coaching gig, you're going to get that. Like in both cases, I would say, or like a radio job or something like that. Yeah. So it really just kind of play out well for the rest of your life.
I'd go. But how long was that career?
It's like 13 years. So to be straight, I'll tell you who I modeled this question after. So you are basically just Steve Novak from Marquette. Like that's basically who you are. And then the handball player is his name is Mikkel Hansen, and he actually did do really well after he retired. Or he married some entrepreneur and like has made like he'll probably end up making more money post career than in his career.
All right, I think I'm going handball.
That's what I would choose. It's hard to say that though, right? Because you like grew up playing basketball, like it's so part of your.
Is kind of something cool in and of itself. Like I pushed the sport forward. I don't even know how to play the sport, but if I theoretically pushed it forward, push the envelope in the handball world, versus Rob Crabb's roommate, where I'm pushing the envelope in the hand job world. um, yeah, I think I'd go handball. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think you'd be fine. Like I would imagine if you're a good basketball player, you'd probably be a pretty good handball player. So a couple easier questions or less lengthy. Who are you cheering for in the Super Bowl?
So Tyler is like obsessed with football. That's part of why I think I've become a bigger Indiana football fan. Not that I needed that much of a push, but like he's just obsessed. Plays it, plays flag football, watches anything he can get his hands on. We were talking about what is it, UFL? He was like, UFL, you should start watching that. I'm like, dude, calm down, man. San Diego or San Antonio Roughnecks, but so he's kind of gotten me much more into football. Like I baseball was my sport. I played it at a competitive level. I played football kind of in middle school, up to middle school. I played basketball, up to early high school. Didn't play varsity, but baseball has always been my thing. Football is his thing. So I'm kind of getting away from your question, but I watched so much more NFL this year just because of him. It's sort of like the thing you do. I would say 100% Bills at this point. 100%.
Bills? I think a lot of us are.
Right? Rooting for?
Say that again?
Rooting for.
Rooting for. Yeah. I'm on the same page.
Lions would have been a contender if they wouldn't have choked, but.
Yeah, that sucked. I mean, I wasn't surprised, but like it just felt like they were due to lose, and like just comes at the wrong time.
It was the wrong time, and now like I've always even though both the AFC West, I shouldn't say this, but like I've always kind of rooted Kansas City when they were the upstart, but now that they're a dynastic team, and I just feel like everyone's pushing the Kelsey brothers down our throats. And
I'll say this is someone that enjoys like listening to them for the most part. I am exhausted of hearing about Jason Kelsey in particular. Like they have absolutely been overexposed at this point.
And like his wife has a podcast. I'm not like some big conspiratorial thing like the Illuminati's pushing all this down some agenda, but it's just it's too much, man. Like I don't care what the Kelsey brothers have to say or Kylie Kelsey or yada yada yada. So they've become like the evil empire now. Pretty heavily. And I have an emotional attachment to Josh Allen. He's a Wyoming guy. Although I kind of spent a lot of time there for work. He was still is my quarterback, right? There's a fantasy attachment to him. So, I just like the Detroits, the Buffaloes, the Pittsburghs, those cities that get shit on, a little bit of Baltimore, kind of Philly.
What about Cincinnati?
Oh, Cincinnati for sure. I root Cincinnati. I'm not jury's out on Joe Burrow. I'm a big Cincinnati fan.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly pretty place. Maybe that's the draft location 2027.
I would love that. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. What was the last movie you saw in a movie theater?
I don't know. I mean, it'd be probably something with the kids. It would have been ages ago.
Ages ago. Okay. I was just wondering because, like, I feel like a lot of people are like, I haven't seen a movie in the movie theaters since prior to COVID. I've been trying to go back more frequently. There's a theater right by us, and it's like super cheap. So like I've seen like Conclave, I saw Gladiator 2. Like I'm trying to see some of the Oscar nominations. That's what I'm trying to get in. But yeah, I was just kind of curious.
No, I mean, so there's a drive-in movie theater up in Buena Vista, Colorado. We saw Despicable Me, one of those. I fell asleep within 10 minutes. It was kind of nice. Woke up when the movie was over. That was fun. Another draft location up in the mountains, Buena Vista, Colorado. But yeah, I haven't seen anything in a true movie theater in a while.
Gotcha. No worries. Fill in the blank. Rob Crabb is a misunderstood blank.
I think he's a very well understood um, yokel. And I mean, Rob's so great because he takes the ribbing like no other. I mean, he's just so fun to
Yeah.
make fun of.
I mean,
He's
he is
not
just
misunderstood.
always getting hit and punched in the face by a lot of people.
So deserves it, man. It's like what was he talking shit about the other day in the chat? Like, I don't even the Notre Dame down 16, and he's like throwing shade at us for something. It's like, dude, your shit talking is so like C minus, but it's just a constant barrage of it. So respect,
Never
man.
ending. And it just doesn't matter what happens.
Doesn't
It
matter.
just
Doesn't
keeps
matter
coming.
doesn't matter the team. So I don't think he's misunderstood on anything. I think his constant barrage of messaging makes him a very well understood person. We get it, Rob. You're a front runner.
Yes. Is a misunderstood front runner, perhaps.
Yeah, he's pretty well understood.
So this next question you may have already answered, but what is a talent or interest that the league does not know about you?
Oh, scuba diving?
Yeah.
Yeah, scuba diving, but I would say a lot of you guys know this, but my dad is a bird watcher. Sort of a well-known one in the birding community. I'm not into birds at all. I'm colorblind, so I can't see them for shit. But he's also so he's a biologist at one point, but like he's also big into snakes, and that's much more fun than birding. So like going to the Everglades, searching for snakes.
Oh wow.
I wouldn't say that's my hobby quite yet, but when my dad's like doing it with his brothers who are all kind of like nature nerds, for a family get together, that's much more fun to do. So maybe if we go to Miami, pop into the Everglades and see if we can catch some snakes.
Those things scare the shit out of me. I don't know how I could do it. I couldn't do it, but I support it. Who was your favorite wrestler growing up? You always talk about Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, so I always presume it's him, but
I like Scott Hall.
R.I.P.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he died like 2 years ago, I think. He had like a heart attack after like a hip, and he's been in bad shape for a long time. But yeah, he did pass away.
A lot of them have. I mean, I definitely. So, I think a lot of people have a similar wrestling interest trajectory as me, right? Like a big fan at the age of 7, completely ignored it for 8 years, something like that. Then pay-per-view and the Attitude Era kind of starts coming back, and that's what made, I think, part of it fun. Is like you're like, who's the Scott Hall guy? He looks just like Razor Ramon. And they're like, holy shit, that is Razor Ramon. So kind of seeing these guys, turn from turn to heel or hero to heel was fun, or just interesting. Kind of got me into wrestling. I don't really follow wrestling at all now, although Tyler is like, we pop it on.
So you kind of getting to that age where it's like kind of fun to do with him.
Kind of fun, yeah.
Yeah.
Diamond Dallas Page, I liked. He had kind of that under.
Yeah.
A little bit underdog approach. I mean, at the time, Goldberg, I was a huge Goldberg fan.
Yeah.
But that's like saying, that's probably who Rob Krabb's favorite wrestler is, right? Bringing that reference again. So I would say DDP.
Yeah.
Big. Stone Cold.
It's a good one. Yeah.
I still say all the time, oh, you didn't know?
Yeah.
I can't remember whose intro that was.
That was the Road Dogg.
Was it?
The Road Dogg, the New Age Outlaws, him and Billy Gunn.
Yeah.
He's really good on the mic. He could really sing too, apparently. It's really funny, like with that stuff, because I was like super obsessed with it for like a 4-year period of time. And like I learned everything. Like I was all into the dirt sheets. Like I was obsessed. And then like I stopped watching it completely, but like my interest in specifically that time period has never died, like the behind the scenes stuff and everything. And like you go onto YouTube, there is just tons of content with like interviews and stuff like that. And like it's really funny because like all the people that I liked were like truly hated backstage, and all the people that I didn't really like were like really good people. So like that sort of dynamic is pretty interesting. But yeah, and like actually I know they're having the Royal Rumble in Indianapolis this year. So like I don't know if Tim would go to something like that, but I have some friends back in Indy who would absolutely go, who have kept up with it. Like I still kind of follow it, kind of like from a distance, especially with like Pat McAfee becoming like a big part of it. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think I mean obviously they took it in a different way, right? Like
Yeah,
breaking it out with Raw and SmackDown or whatever. I have no clue. That was not my era. Not that it's my era anymore, but I think they need just what would maybe bring me back is a little bit more of the campy type of storylines. Everybody's just has a normal name like John Cena or Roman Reigns, right? Or whatever. I mean, nobody has, kind of crazy Undertaker, Kane.
Yeah.
Who's the other weird guy like Mick Foley type? I mean, some of those obviously goofball types of characters to ramp up the entertainment factor might help too.
Yeah.
I'm sure other people would disagree, but
yeah. Anyway, but speaking of wrestling, who would win in a wrestling match? Rob Crabb or Dan Gower?
I don't know, probably Crabb. He was vicious in the pool a couple years ago.
He was vicious.
Throwing his weight around.
He's a pretty sturdy dude, but Dan's got all that height.
Dan's got some height. I'm gonna give it to Crabb though.
Okay. All right.
I think Gower might work in some intellectual tactician, masterminding that might, like a Trojan horse type move, some sort of Odysseus kind of strategy that might win the day though. So don't count him out.
So let me ask you something. How competitive are you with your kids? Like in anything? Could be athletics, could be knowing stuff, doing stuff, whatever. Like on a scale of 1 to 10.
Not too competitive yet.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna share my screen. I want to know if you would ever get this competitive with one of your kids. So I'm gonna show you a tweet that was shared. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So this dad has been collecting like biometric data on himself and his kids, who's like 19. And apparently he's gotten like really caught up in the erection episodes and quality, him versus his 19-year-old. So like this is like true alpha Vanderpool type stuff. You ever see yourself trying to keep up with your kids like this?
Probably not to that extent. What sort of app is this?
So this is like the guy who's doing this is actually one of those guys who's like super into extension of life, like trying to slower your like aging curve, if you will. So like he's into like all those sort of like drugs and therapies and stuff like that. But apparently you can have this sort of, I don't know how you would wear it or like how you get this stuff, but like apparently it can be done. I just learned about this at about 12:30 this afternoon, and like just couldn't stop shaking my head. Like how I would not like his son did like reply to this, so like it's all good, I guess. But I don't know.
Cupping his balls in his Apple Watch, I guess.
Yeah, like I don't. I mean, they got sleep efficiency in there, but like I don't know how you score average erection quality, like on a 0 to 100 score, but 94 to 90. So yeah, I mean the future, I guess.
Well, it gives me something to strive for.
Yeah. Next question is, I'm an idiot. I should have kept sharing. So I shared my Hall of Fame ballot online. I was wondering, I'm going to pull up so you can take a look at it. Who would have made yours? Obviously, Ichiro, Sabathia, and Billy Wagner made it. But I was wondering who would make it for if you had been in charge.
Uh, well, so one thing I always consider, and I'm a little bit of a Hall of Fame purist, right? Like I think there should be very, very, very few first ballot unanimous Hall of Famers. Um, Ichiro's obviously a Hall of Famer. Um, I'm glad he was kind of one vote short though of not making it unanimous. Um, I mean, so who is a Hall of Fame baseball player in my mind? Ichiro. I think Omar Vizquel is at what, like 14%, something like that these days. I
Yeah.
mean, I think he's such a underrated baseball player. I've never really, although I love going back and like looking at old players' WAR, and like I was looking at like Dante Bichette.
Yeah.
Not that good of a ball player, Sean. I don't know how much you can
Cool.
trust like old WAR numbers. Um,
It's so tough because the run environment was high, and he played in cores for most of his career. So like that really brings his.
I mean,
It's just really hard to do. Like Larry Walker's really the only one from that era for the Rockies
um, yeah, yeah. But
that
I mean,
got
Dante
there.
Bichette had some ungodly numbers, like 40 some
Yes,
home runs,
he was
135
he was good.
RBIs, hit 300, and like a WAR of like 2.5, something like
Yeah.
that. Um, Tough to say. I mean, so I think there were some, and I don't know if you have like what it ended up being, or if you can pull that up. There were some that are like falling off the ballot this year that I'm kind of surprised by. Um,
Yes, I was too.
because they're,
Um,
again, like I don't think Cargo is a Hall of Famer, but I don't know. That I feel like there's tiers, right? There's first ballot Hall of Famer unanimous. There's first ballot Hall of Famers. There's Hall of Famers, and then there's guys who I just think should be on the ballot, whether or not they make it. Right? It's um, which is not really an empirical vote at the end of the day, but I'd like to see Cargo get a few more votes to stay on the ballot. Although I believe I saw he's fallen off. I should have prepped more. And then, of course, you have guys in that completely separate boat, all the steroid era guys who are Hall of Fame baseball players who don't necessarily belong in the Hall of Fame. Manny Ramirez, Hall of Fame baseball player. A-Rod, Hall of Fame baseball player. Um, I'm not convinced either should be in the Hall of Fame until there's some sort of easier judgment on that era. Because if Mark McGuire's not in, they shouldn't be in um, by similar standards. Um, I was surprised Billy Wagner got in. Hall of Fame baseball writers have always kind of hated on closers, or for so long they hated on closers until the
yeah,
Mariano Rivera era kind of ushered in era of top tier closers. Um, so he's one I didn't really expect. I can't remember what he got last year. Um,
he came 5 votes short last year, and this was his last year on the ballot.
yeah, yeah. So Andrew Jones, I can't remember his numbers, but he's just been hanging around and getting closer and closer, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look at things a little bit more, but there's things on here that have just surprised me. Obviously, King Felix had some amazing years, Hall of Fame years.
Yeah.
I probably would have voted those top two for sure. Again, I would vote for Omar Vizquel to keep him on the ballot. I'm not convinced he's a Hall of Famer. There's got what do you drop off at if you don't hit?
You have to hit 5%. So these guys fell off.
So Hanjali Ramirez, 0 votes. I don't know. I mean, yeah. So Cargo, 2 votes. I don't know. Not that they're necessarily Hall of Fame baseball players, but I'd like to see them a little bit higher. Stay on the ballot.
Yeah. I was just going to say, and I brought this up a couple of times, but it's really interesting with Russell Martin and Brian McCann because they have almost the same WAR as Yadier Molina. And Molina is going to probably be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And they fell off the ballot the first year, even though they basically have the same numbers. Because but like the thing is, and I kind of go back to this because a lot of it, especially during this time period, and it'll kind of change as we continue forward. But like if you watch a St. Louis Cardinals game, and they were in the playoffs a lot, so they did get national attention. It was basically, you talk about Albert Pujols, and he's like, Yadier Molina, best catcher since Johnny Bench, or whoever. Like, he got, like, it was like always like the tagline, and I agree with it. Like, I've watched an absurd amount of Molina over the course of my career, and I do believe he's a Hall of Famer. But like, I just really struggle to reconcile that Russell Martin, who was also a very good pitch framer and had kind of probably better offensive numbers, isn't on the ballot. And McCann was definitely more offensive than either of them.
I think part of that's the risk we run when we become so metric focused in everything, right? Like Kenny Lofton is another guy. Every year, people are like, we need to trade for Kenny Lofton. Trade deadline's coming up. We need someone like a Kenny Lofton in this clubhouse. If we're going to make the playoffs, we need Kenny Lofton. If we want to go deep in the playoffs, we need Kenny Lofton. That doesn't show up necessarily in the stats, but the character in the clubhouse is a huge piece of what makes.
You could make the argument that he was the greatest defensive center fielder of all time. I mean, obviously, there's you got like your Willie Mays and folks like that in there, but like, I mean, he was an incredible player, throughout the 90s for Cleveland.
I mean, his numbers from Ichiro are not shockingly different if you look them side by side. And Ichiro, almost a unanimous first ballot guy, and Kenny Lofton just, I don't know, doesn't quite make it. Now, nothing against Ichiro. I mean, surefire Hall of Famer, would want him in my clubhouse every day of the year. But there's pieces in here. There's a lot of guys I think who have, like Billy Wagner. I mean, I don't know.
I will defend Billy Wagner to my death, because I believe I would take Wagner over Rivera if I had to like do a World Series, because his strikeout rate is insane, especially for his era. But I get it. Like it kind of goes to that whole small hall versus big hall sort of thing, and like there are no wrong answers like on here anymore. Like I like doing the exercise. I think it's fun to talk about, but I don't. It at the end of the day, it's a museum in Cooperstown, New York. Like, but it is fascinating kind of how we cherry pick different people, because like Rob asked me about Bobby Abreu, who I put on my ballot. And if you look at Bobby Abreu's numbers, they are insane. But they took place during the steroid era. But like, I think about his numbers aren't actually that dissimilar than like, say, someone like Joey Votto, who I do think will go into the Hall of Fame first ballot, because he is kind of an archetype in a lot of ways, and was he was really articulate in explaining how he does things and why he doesn't do certain things. But like, there's no mouthpiece behind Bobby Abreu when he played. He was not like a player that you thought about a lot. They're just like, yeah, I'd like to have him on my team because he's really productive. But like, he wasn't super sexy. He didn't make many all-star teams. But look at his page on Baseball Reference or Fangraphs or wherever, and it's like, damn.
He had Fantasy Reference for sure, because he got some stolen bases like back in the at least in the Roto days. But I hear you. It's sort of like any New York Yankee or hell, New York Jet, right? Like if Joe Namath plays anywhere else that's not New York, is he
still
talked about 60 years later? Probably not. I mean, Derek Jeter, hell of a baseball.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I mean, really good baseball player, but if he's on the Kansas City Royals, like still a Hall of Famer, but not the reverence that we have. He's not in a fucking Capital One commercial, right?
Right.
There's so many of those guys. It's just, Kobe Bryant, love Kobe Bryant. If he's not a Laker, you get so much more notoriety in LA or New York that you don't elsewhere. Especially in the Sports Center days. It's different now, I think, a little bit, because nobody tunes into Sports Center like they did. But back in the day, it was like leading off. What did Kobe Bryant do tonight in LA? What did Derek Jeter do tonight in New York? Yeah. And so that could carry people's careers and an element of notoriety that just didn't exist if you're a Toronto Blue Jay. Period. So, I hear that. There's a lot of guys I think fall in that bucket, and I think if Omar Vizquel was a Yankee, he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
It definitely would be a considerable, a different conversation for sure.
I mean, even Ozzie Smith kind of had that like Cardinals bump. Not that Cardinals are quite in the same caliber, but when you're a Cardinal, you're a storied, you know,
Yeah,
um,
they're
storied.
there. I
They're
can't
there.
argue that.
Talked about. They're kind of in the same vein as the Dodgers in terms of history and acclaim, and so there's that exists specifically in baseball when you're talking 162 game series, and Sports Center needs to come up with some talking points at night that that's just
Yeah, or you just put it on MLB Network.
right.
That's all they're going to show. But like speaking of that, like and speaking of Cleveland, what are your thoughts on their offseason? Like I have my own thoughts, but I was kind of curious what you thought.
Um, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter, right? With Cleveland, it's like if you would have told me, hey, yeah, so the Guardians are gonna make it that far in the playoffs, I'd be like, oh, so Tristan McKenzie, tell me that prior to the year, like this is what's gonna happen. I'd be like, oh, so Shane Bieber, must have won the Cy Young, right? No, he didn't actually play. Oh,
Blew out his arm the first week of the season, in fact.
be like, oh, so Tristan McKenzie finally like
Figured it out.
Figured it out, right? No, that didn't happen either. Like I don't know how they did it last year. Nothing will ever surprise me with that team. And then the Central is obviously you have the Sox and everyone beat up on them, but it's always going to be kind of competitive. I don't know. I can't understand it. Nothing makes sense from last.
They're an interesting team in my mind because they're always trying to slash payroll. Like they traded Josh Naylor, and I was really disappointed they didn't trade him to the Reds. But like everyone knew they were going to trade Josh Naylor this offseason. Like I have a buddy down the hall who's actually also a massive Guardians fan. He's like, oh yeah, they're gonna trade him. It just seems like it's a really well run organization from an analytics perspective. But the moment someone gets a little bit expensive, unless they're Jose Ramirez, they're getting traded.
Jose Ramirez to put some dollars in. I mean, I couldn't tell you. I have no clue what's going to happen next year. Now, a lot of guys like haven't ever quite popped on the offensive side in for Cleveland like in the last few years, but I don't know. I really don't know. I have no clue what to expect. I thought I looked down on them so much this year and was just like shocked when they made it that far and proved everybody wrong, proved me wrong. So who knows?
Yeah. So now getting back into more of the league stuff. I know folks have probably been waiting for this part. What was worse, losing the first championship of the league or the Kettle Marte home run in 2023?
Losing the first. What do you mean? The very first.
The very first one, the one that you lost to Johnny, and I think Shane Victorino hit one to like the warning track to end the season for you. Because it was a really close final. It was a long time ago too, though.
I would say none of us took fantasy that seriously that first year. I know I didn't relative to recent years, so that was not like a heartbreak. I think if my heart breaks, well, it was Kettle Marte, but it was also Soto. I mean, because that was even worse. Like that was the week I was up against Crab. We're talking about the right season. That was last season.
It was 2 years ago. Or well, it was not this past season, but the season before.
Right. So I mean that was such a heartbreak because first thing you got to know, like I stopped caring about fantasy halfway through that year. In fact, I had decided to quit the league. I don't know if I ever told that.
What?
I had kind of snapped. Like it was the week I was playing Johnny. Baseball had just become so not fun for me. I was traveling a lot, and like Sunday watching MLB.TV was not fun. I don't get MLB.TV. I every year I'm like, I need to cancel it, and then I forget to cancel it, and it just rolls over. It's just Sundays are so not fun. You're like a nervous wreck.
Yes.
I was playing Johnny 2 years ago, and he was talking shit, and I was like, fuck this. Like, I'm done. Like, I don't, it's so not worth it. Like, this isn't fun for me anymore. And then I was like, I'm about to pick up my phone and text Murphy and be like, hey, this is my last season. I'm done. But then going through that mental snap, like all of a sudden, just like humbled me, settled me down. And I haven't, it's been like Indiana basketball, like ever since, where it's like, yeah, I'll pay attention. I'm going to set my lineup, but this isn't what my Sundays revolve around anymore. So it's been healthy. But that same year, because that was the year I had the greatest team ever, going into the season, and then kind of
You got the blue mark.
fell short, but made it to the playoffs. Looked like I was going to be happy. In fact, I was eating with my family. I was like telling them like, hey, I have a couple $100 coming in because I just won the league. Like or not won the league, but won that,
Made it the championship, yeah. Which is where most of the money is.
Made a few more $100. Settled down to watch the rest of the game. The only thing that couldn't have happened was like Soto's going to get one more at bat. All he has to do is not hit a home run with somebody on base. And fucking, of course, he did that. I mean, that was as heartbreaking. My biggest heartbreaks in fantasy. That was one of them. If I would have been more maniacal 2 years ago, that would have been just ripping my heart out. That was bad. Cody Bellinger, also against Habby, 4 years ago, which was against the Rockies, so I couldn't watch it. I had to listen to it. Hear the radio announcer like, back, oh my God, it's gone. I'm like, holy shit. And then I think the other year, maybe it was the same year, but heading into the playoffs, Javi Baez breaks a thumb, sliding into second. And then, of course, first week of the playoffs, Yelich shatters his kneecap. Not quite as singular event like a grand slam by Cody Bellinger to tear my heart out, but those are three of the just kick in the ass moments I've had in fantasy. So I don't even remember what the original question was. What was the Kettle Marte situation?
It was the same year as Soto, or it was. You said if anyone says anything about Kettle One vodka, they're dead to me. Like that is what I remember about this, because I think it was an Arizona game that went late. Like there was like a rain delay, or there was something, or went into extra innings or something like that.
Yeah,
but
drinking a Kettle Marte 1 martini.
Yeah, and so that's always been kind of ingrained in my head.
Yeah, I remember the situation because it wasn't like a Joe Carter, Bill Mazeroski end like the Soto. The Soto bomb ended it. The belly bomb ended it. The Kettle Marte situation was something different. That was I think that was like regular season or something. I don't know. I can't quite remember what it was, but that was not the Soto moment. Soto moment was much shorter.
I was going to bring up, I'm glad actually you brought up kind of the annoyance that Sunday can be. It is frequently if you're like even a semi-competitive team, or at least at the beginning. I don't know what to do to make that better, because I can't tell you how many times like I've been like driving like back home, like because I do a lot of driving in the spring, and like I'll get a battering of trades that come through. I push them through. I can't tell you how many times I've probably almost died on the highway just trying to push through for all the trades that come in. But I do feel like there's probably something we need to do so people don't like have to like live like walking on eggshells, like on Sunday mornings, like wondering if their opponent's going to make like a trade that completely flips their matchup on their head. Like, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I know a lot of people have that pain, myself included. So like that is something that I'd like to discuss as a league.
Well, you're in kind of a boat by yourself on that, just from the administrative point of view. I mean, I think that's what makes this trade, this league fun, right? Is like hey, I just made this trade. Don't push it through until
until like 11:30 or like right before pitch.
Before, because I don't want them to have any chance to respond.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just part of the strategy that goes along that I think is enjoyable. But Sundays are just a wreck. I mean, I don't know. Number one, don't get MLB.TV. I just can't encourage people enough. If you don't have it, consider yourself lucky. Watch Sunday Night Baseball if it comes down to that, but just don't get MLB.TV. It's just a horrible, horrible, horrible value destruction in your life.
You will, you'll definitely do some dread game casting as well, just watching little dots come in. If you don't want to put the video on, I do that all the time. Before we actually get into this season, well, I guess to get into this season, aside from yourself, if you had to pick right now who will win the league, who would you guess?
Well, it wouldn't be me. I think past my prime. Am I connected? You see me?
I see you. I hear you. You're good.
Trying to reconnect. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I think what we've seen, I just, and I say I don't know because I haven't really studied the rosters enough, but I think I wouldn't doubt because Crab's got a stack of cash, right?
We're
Um,
gonna get into that.
and I think, what we've seen, what this league has found out in the last few years is you have to have like a college basketball team, you have to have a couple of one and dones, like a Garrett Cole $90 pitcher type deal to complement, some seasoned vets that that are still rosterable. I don't know who's quite in that fold. I mean, Crab's team, just off the top of my head, he still has some of the residual. If Vlad can put his year together, I mean, a lot of things have to happen, but if you have a big swinging dick full of cash, that's always a good place to start.
Yeah. I'm gonna share my screen again. Um, let's do this. So I'm going to bring up all of the trades that have gone on since the beginning of this season because that's what I want to jump into. You're the first person that I have gotten to chat about this with someone. Well, I mean, I've chatted with people, but first kind of broadcast. And so, like, what I've done is I've taken them from, in my mind, the least interesting to the most interesting trades. So I combined the Gower trade that I made, which was Bybee and Lindor in exchange for $80 in Tristan Casas. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I need money. I had like $18 coming into the off season, so like I'm very poor.
What does Frankie Lindor keep at these days?
It's like 22 or $24.
Okay.
I didn't really think it was super interesting. I mean, I traded Lindor last year for like 25, although I did include Jackson Merrill in that deal, but I couldn't really think of a way to like honestly trade him for more, even though we basically had the same season, but perhaps got a bit more notoriety in the process. And then they included, he and Tetro included Casas, who I was really happy to get. But then because I need money, I turned around and traded him to Tim, which I wasn't really thrilled about, but I don't really have a choice because of the money. And I do think he's a really good player to speculate on. There's a lot of, in my, like, I think Tim compared him to Schwarber. I would say he's like the better comp in my mind would be Matt Olson. I think he's going to have really high highs, and I think he's going to have some lower lows, but he's going to hit for a lot of power.
Still young, a lot of runway to go too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a fan.
For sure. Yeah.
I think that's a fair trade. I mean, if I was you, I certainly would have done exactly what you did.
I did get Edwin Diaz in this too.
Reunites Gower with Lindor. Bring him back home.
Yeah. I thought it was a good trade for Dan. Dan's got a chance. Like, I really like Dan's team. What he's done, obviously because they're like kind of my old players, but Tanner Bybee probably has one more level in him. I don't think he'll ever be like kind of truly Cy Young, but I think he's going to be a consistent top 25 starting pitcher in the league for a while. So I like that as like a way to complement Skeens. He still has Sonny Gray, so like I thought it made a lot of sense. It didn't break his bank by any means. So I generally like that. And Lindor basically replaces Yelich for his keepers. So I thought it was a boring but needed trade for Dan. And then for me, obviously, it was the cash. I will say in any other year for the VJ and Trent trade, this would be, I would give Trent, like, I love this trade for both of them, but I love it a little more for Trent if I were to prescribe a trade to anyone in the league, it would be exactly what Trent did, and that was to go and get VJ's, not his top three because he still has Kubel because he has just so many good pitchers, but to get Wheeler, Kirby, and Valdez in our league format, I think is phenomenal. The only thing I would critique VJ on is the fact that he didn't get Jackson Jobe thrown into the deal, but it's also good for him because he reloads. He's got a full roster anyway. So I love this trade for both. I thought it was fantastic for both sides, but how do you feel about it?
I mean, that was one of the ones that shook the league. I think you're right. It's not my kind of trade. And part of that, you know my thoughts on Zach Wheeler. Like, he's just perpetually, I feel like 38 years old every year. But
you definitely have an age bias. That's really funny to me.
For sure. And but it's not an unfair trade. I mean, $180 plus the keeper values of those guys. It's value add for Trent this year. I don't think you're probably keeping. You might keep George Kirby next year. I don't know. I doubt you're keeping Wheeler. You're probably Forever Valdez. You never know. He's so hit or miss. But good trade, even trade. I don't see a residual sort of, anything beyond the 2025 season of value for either of them, like maybe the Ohtani, well, not maybe the Ohtani trade, but the Ohtani trade for sure.
Well, I think Kirby you can keep for at least 2 years. I agree that you're probably throwing Wheeler and Fromber back next year. Yep. But, I mean, Kirby's probably a top 15 pitcher in the league.
Yep. I'm guessing, is it $18? That's keepable for sure. Or is it going to be 17? I don't know. But it's not bad. Yeah, you're keeping him. It's not like a $6 or a $4 keeper, but it's
right.
It's not a bad deal for sure.
Yeah. So then we had the big one, and this one I've written about this, which people will see later. But this trade came out of nowhere for me when I was asking for the trades. It came earlier in the day on New Year's Eve, and I had been in conversation with Tim and a little bit with Crab, just kind of like checking in, like talking about stuff, and I had no idea when this was announced. But so Crab trades Shohei Ohtani batter to Tim in exchange for $200, Shane McClanahan and Wyatt Langford. So I'm going to let you talk about this because I feel very strongly about it. But I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts were, because this, I announced it all at midnight. And I guess my first question would be, did you know about it before I announced it? Or did you not hear about it until I announced it?
No,
I guess it would have been 10 o'clock your time.
No, yeah, I didn't. I mean, Tim and I were talking about McClanahan. I was interested for sure in McClanahan. I mean, I don't know how you could feel that strongly either way about it. I mean, Crab gets a fuck ton. It depends on your take on McClanahan, is if he's ever going to come back and be the kind of dominant pitcher that he easily could be, or if he'll go the way of Noah Syndergaard. But fuck ton of cash. I like it for Crab. I mean, we're talking about Crab now as being in the driver's seat heading into the season. I don't know exactly what his roster composition looks like. I mean, obviously you're keeping Shohei Ohtani, right? It's like, well, $18 is too expensive. I'm going to throw him back. But, it probably gives him some roster flexibility without having his roster in front of me that he could play around with, and enough of those.
Well, it basically replaces Ohtani's 18 with McClanahan and Langford.
And yeah, right. I mean, it does, but he might even have, I don't even know if you keep Langford, right? I mean, there's, I don't know what his roster looks like, but he's got a lot of flexibility to it. And some of those mid-range $6 kind of guys that are keepable too. None of them obviously are going to pop Ohtani out of the driver's seat, but I don't know. I liked it for Crab.
Yeah, I loved it for Crab. So I'll tell my story a little bit. So this trade came in at about 2 o'clock, I want to say, somewhere right after lunchtime. This ended my workday when this came through. I was blown away by the amount of money. It's a historic trade. It's basically the same trade as the Walker Buehler trade that you had 5 or 6 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But I love Shane McClanahan. I don't understand why Shane McClanahan's in this. And I think Wyatt Langford is probably also, if we're talking about Wyatt Langford in the same vein as Kyle Tucker at this time next season, wouldn't be surprised at all. So I don't understand why they were included. I understand Ohtani for, I don't love 200. Like, I think 125 is fair. I mean, keep this in mind. 2 years ago, Juan Soto at the same price was traded for $80.
Yeah, right.
And now Shohei is going for 200 plus, a top 25 pitcher dynasty wise and a top 20 outfielder dynasty wise. Like, I just don't understand. Like, it's fine. Like, maybe it's a little overpay, but I don't understand how Shane McClanahan and Wyatt Langford are in this deal. Like, I value Shane McClanahan almost at the same price as Shohei Ohtani, batter himself, at $7. Like, McClanahan's only 28 years old. They expect him to pitch 150 innings this year. Like, and I have thought on this a little bit. Like, I have, like, kind of eased up on Tim's side of it, but, like, I also just hate what it does for Tim's flexibility. Like, there was so many other things that you could have done with this money other than go buy the best player, like, in baseball. There's no doubt he's my top projected offensive player. He can pair him with Bobby Witt, and that's great. But, like, now you have to go replace McClanahan and Langford, and he doesn't have that much money to do that. So, like, and you can figure this out as the season goes along, but I would have liked to have seen him done something different with that money than go pay a fuck ton of money. I just also don't know who was he bidding against, like, for Ohtani. There was no one with money.
That's probably,
he was the only one.
I think the dollar amount's too high. Now, at the end of the season, well, you're right. It gives them a lot less to play with. The difference between 125 and 200's, massive. I mean, that's
Aaron Judge.
That's an Aaron Judge, right? You can add to the team. I'm not in love with Wyatt Langford. I mean, yes, dynasty aspect, but $15 next year, I presume, right?
Right.
I mean, that's not like a great price. I don't know if I can see where Tim's head is at with Wyatt Langford. Probably wasn't going to keep him at that price. Shane McClanahan, I mean, I don't know. I love him. I mean, he's my type of guy, young arm, but he's still coming off a surgery. Like,
yeah, there's risk, no doubt about it. But, like, if I was going to do this trade and I've got a Tommy John guy, I would have traded Yuri Perez.
Well, or nothing, right? I mean, like, $200 should be,
or nothing. Yeah, I mean, ideally, like, I was like, I'm going to give you $200 for Ohtani.
I could see where Tim's headspace is. Like, I don't trust McClanahan's arm. I don't, Wyatt Langford isn't maybe going to help me in 2025 as much. All that put together, to your point, I wasn't even thinking about that. Like, who's he bidding against? Because I don't know that Crab keeps Ohtani one way or another, but $100, $125 might have been enough to get the deal done. Like, you'd have to think. It's bonkers. I mean, we're not going to see another deal like that on January 1st forever. I couldn't suspect.
And, like, so, like, the other thing that because I spent a lot of time thinking about this trade, like, an unhealthy amount of time. The other thing that I think Tim has probably done is he's readjusted Ohtani's baseline to basically be what Ohtani did last year. And I don't think that's the situation at all, because Ohtani didn't pitch last year. So we got to steal all those bases. I don't think there's any way he's going for 50 steals this year. He's probably going to go back to 20. He also tore his labrum in the World Series. I don't see it. Like, I think he'll be very good. I think he'll score, 650, 700 points, but he's not going to score like 850. So, like,
yeah, I mean, fair enough. That's he's had historic season, and I don't know. I wouldn't hit Timmy too hard on that. I would say the dollar amount is just doesn't need to be that high. Period. In the story, because you're probably right. You're not going to get 850 from Ohtani, but you could get 700, which is still a monumental amount that I would take any day of the week. And next year he gets to keep him for 21.
Yeah, I was thinking through, like, what his, like, I think Tim is very likely to make the playoffs with this deal in place. Like, I mean, you could do it. You could make over straight for sure. Like, Shohei Ohtani's pretty bankable, and he's got Bobby Witt, and he's got Logan Gilbert, and now he's got Casas, and he's got Junior Caminero, and he's got some pieces. But like, I think he's perhaps overstating how easy it is to get pitching in season, which I don't think is very easy. I think it's very easy to get hitting. So I would have done this the other way around. I would have done what Trent did and maybe bid that up a little more and gotten those three. I would just rather, and also these came at basically at the same time. I would just rather have Trent's side than Tim's side if I'm trying to win a title this year.
You mean just
but like I like it for Tim next year.
Yeah, just in relation to these three guys Trent gets for 180 versus what Tim had to shell out for 100 or for 200, right? Or are you looking at their whole team combined? I mean, nobody's going to say it's an underpayment. I think.
Yeah,
Trent
I mean,
paid near.
So like, I will pull up. This can also serve as a tutorial for folks who don't use it this way, but hopefully they do. But like, yes, share. Thank you. So like, if we look at this, so let's look at Tim's roster. So we got Tim. Tim's got Shohei. He's got Bobby. He's got Logan. He's gonna get Casas. He's gonna keep, or at least trade, Caminero. And then I just feel like things get really tough right here for him. So like, you go Jazz, like that's fine. You could keep Yuri, even though he's probably not going to pitch until midseason. But like, what are you like the last 16 of this, and you're already down to 241 after the 90. You're at 167. It's just such a top heavy. I just hate how top heavy this team is.
Yeah.
And there's just so many things that have to go right. Like there's some other players like Sean Manaea, he's probably keeping, or at least I would, but he's gonna have to chase pitching all season.
I mean, if I think there's probably better $6 keepers you can buy for a few bucks. I mean, Sean Manaea, yeah, okay, fine. But you're right. He doesn't have a lot of those $6 kind of guys. I mean, I like Yuri Perez, Casas, you keep. I think I have like an abundance of keepable $6 guys, and he doesn't kind of look into his roster. It is very top heavy, and it kind of took away his ability to make some moves here.
Yeah, I mean, you do like. I mean, you are a natural partner for him to make a trade. I mean, see what happens with Kodai, but that would be a guy. You've got Tyler O'Neill who just signed that contract. He's going to play. I mean, you have a lot of cheap guys. Like you did a really good job picking off cheap players towards the end of the season, or as the course of the season went along. So maybe that does become a trade. But again, he doesn't have a lot of money. So like,
yeah,
he basically is in a situation now where he has to trade to get more money.
Yeah.
To make a deal like that, or he's going to have to, do like a player for player. Because like there's really no pitching after Logan Gilbert unless he's just going to spend his whole auction, going and getting, a Blake Snell or a Garrett Cole. But then you're filling in with shitty players after that. I just feel like it's a headache of a build.
Yeah.
And that's what frustrates me about it. Whereas when I look at Trent and VJ, I'm just going to kind of go and show how I manage things during my offseason. Trent's really easy. Trent doesn't have to do shit if he doesn't want the rest of the whole fucking offseason. He basically finished in the first minute of the offseason when you build out his roster, which he should. I mean, he's got some good $6 players in here too. Bam. Fits perfectly. Wheeler, Kirby, Valdez, and then he's got two good outfielders in Moran and Duran. And then Schellenbach, who is He's going to be one of the most hyped starting pitchers. If you've done any fantasy research, that's the guy everyone's going to be pointing to as the hot guy to add. And it's just a really easy odd. And he's got guys he can sell still. But he's also made it so, and this is what I really liked. I don't even know if he intentionally did this, but he made it so he couldn't fuck up his keepers. Because I see that happen every year, where someone wants to get, clever and, I'm going to keep Chase McDermott because he had a hot camp. But he can't do that because these guys are already so good. They already are above the threshold. So, maybe you liquidate Framber Valdez, but, he's done.
Yeah. Well, he is. I mean, he could sell some guys to a Tim, right?
Yeah. Trent can give Tim his scraps. That's the way I look at it. I mean, VJ is the same situation.
Trent had a very clear, because I'm sure we all do this, I have a literal line on my spreadsheet of, who's above the line, who's below the line. And my line is very gray this year just because I have so many Darvishes at $6 and
yada
yada.
Yeah, I've played with your roster a little bit. I mean, you got Cease, you got Tatis. If I could click this thing, that'd be great.
I think Luis Robert keeps it 6. Not that I'm gonna.
I can check. I don't know if he ever cleared. What are you gonna do with Pete Alonso?
If there's any listeners out there, I mean, I could be convinced to sell.
Yeah, he's a tricky one. He might sign with the Blue Jays, which would move Vlad over to third. Blue Jays are such a weird organization. And then you got Walker Buehler, who's tricky. You got Ozzie Albies, who is kind of an every other year player.
Yeah, this should be a good year this year.
Yeah, it should be. You got some guys. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what moves you make. And I think we'll get a second wave of trades going once spring training starts here in about a month. I know Kaiser and Habby are ones to wait to thaw out into their baseball trading. I mean, there's usually good discounts there too. But it's frustrating as hell for me because I want to sell all this shit so I can go back into the market. And I don't know if it's going to happen. I might end up with $90 of players and then, 5 $2 players.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
See, I'm a guy who could fuck up my keepers, right? I have a lot of these. I pick Luis Severino over, Xander Bogaerts, right? And Xander.
I would pick Severino. I would not touch Xander Bogaerts with a 10-foot pole, but I say that and I'll probably end up drafting him. But yeah, you have a lot of tricky decisions.
Yeah.
Bellinger, Muncy. I know you're a Muncy guy.
I'm a Muncy guy. Just need more bats. I mean, I probably won't keep him for $8.
Kikuchi's really good. You're not going to trade. You might trade him, but he was. I dropped him. You picked him up, and he was basically like Blake Snell the rest of the season.
Yeah, he was a stud. I am looking to maybe keep him, but I mean, I have a lot of those guys in that $6 range that I need to find out what to do on.
Yeah. Yep. So, do you have any other thoughts? Any other topics you want to discuss?
So New Orleans. I haven't seen a lot of chatter on this, but the hotel rooms are booked at the Caesars. Have other folks?
Yeah. Did you go to their website to try? Because I saw that you're right across the street, so it doesn't really matter. So what I did was I booked a regular room on Friday night, and I booked a suite on Saturday night with the idea that I think I'll have Tim and Trent with me, and then if Rob and Adam come in, we'll have enough room to just keep them there and divide that, because like usually that Saturday night's pretty. There's a lot of drinking and eating and whatever. It's not like you're gonna really do a lot of sleeping to begin with. Yeah. But I don't know. I would encourage people to check the website, and I'll check it again. But like, I mean, if that hotel makes more sense, then do that. I mean, I got the suite with the idea that we would meet there for the actual auction, so we have one place to meet. And obviously, I'll get like some beer and stuff like that to, for the actual draft, and then we'll go off to Rob's thing. I thought Rob did a good job with his selection of dinner, because it's kind of a like very much a New Orleans style restaurant, but still in the spirit of it being at basically a steakhouse. So I thought he did a good job selecting, from what I can tell off the menu.
Amen, brother. I'm pumped. I love New Orleans, one of my favorite cities.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We got a lot of snow last week though, which is very unusual.
Yeah. How are things in Canada? Cold too?
Yeah, it got up to it's 14 degrees right now, Fahrenheit. Super super exciting stuff. This has probably been the coldest winter thus far since we moved here. It's been pretty warm. Like the first few years I've been here, I was like, this is nothing. This is exactly like Indianapolis or Cincinnati. But it's definitely a bit colder this year. We'll see if that continues, but it's not, I don't know. People blow out of proportion. The only thing I care about is the wind. If it's really windy, it's going to feel really cold. It can be 10 degrees outside. There's no wind. It's not going to bother me. So
I'd say the sun. I just need sun.
Yeah.
I don't really care about cold, but I don't miss those Netherlands days.
Actually, let's see.
What the hell's that?
If we have any updates. Oh, this is the link. Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh. This is just the link to like where you update and stuff.
Gotcha.
Share.
So I'm tentatively arriving Thursday night, just FYI. I think I put
Oh, okay.
9 a.m. Effectively 9 a.m. But
yeah, so we got Trent, you, Rob on Saturday, me, and I think there's a decent chance Adam will come in. Adam's in Austin, if I'm not mistaken, that week, so I think he's going to try to fly in Saturday as well. And then Tim confirmed yesterday. I think Tim is probably going to be buying his ticket the next couple of days, so he'll be in as well.
So who's not? Do we know who's not coming? Is that the Reds?
Yes. We definitely won't have Chad, Melinda, or VJ in. And I haven't heard from.
Why not?
I've asked VJ. Gary and VJ just had a kid just a few weeks ago.
What? Oh, did they?
Yeah.
A few weeks ago.
It was like maybe 10 days after I saw him in Detroit for the Red Wings game.
Congrats, buddy. But
yeah. So he's definitely not going to make it. And Gower just hasn't entered in his information yet for it. So, but I presume he'll be there. So I'm guessing we're going to get 7 or 8 guys at least on auction day.
All right. It'd be good to meet Trent. I'm excited.
Yeah, I've only got to meet Trent for maybe an hour last year. And he fits. I mean, obviously with the grooming, like he fits into the league really well. But he's fun. I'm looking forward to getting to know him a bit better as well. But he's been a great addition to the league. So we'll see. I'm sure at some point we'll have him on again. I'd love to get Dan. Andrew, I'd love to give it anyone on in the future, but I definitely made it a priority to get you on first because it had been a little while. But we'll see what happens. It'll probably the next guest will probably be who's ever made some deals, or if Tim just absolutely unloads after watching this podcast and says that we need to have a conversation about Ohtani. And I welcome that conversation. I think we calculate things a little differently. Probably have the same player analysis, but tie the dollars together differently.
You could bring Tim on next week when Mike Woodson's no longer the coach and get his thoughts on
but
him or
yeah. Do listen to the Kirkwood and Dunn. Trent does a really good job. Trent's an experienced podcaster, and you can really tell as he kind of leads through it. And I do feel like there's a bit of a void with particularly the IU football podcast stuff. Obviously, for basketball, there's a lot of different podcasts out, but I think they do a really good job, and I think they have the commentary like Trent kind of sets tease things up for Tim, and Tim is certainly one to have plenty of opinion. So it's a really good dynamic and really well produced. In fact, I'm sure people have seen Riverside. I'm using that because I saw they were using it and it seemed like a better tool. So I think this went pretty well from a production standpoint. So we'll probably keep it in the future.
I feel like we're the missing Kelsey brothers.
Yeah, for sure. Except without all those millions.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, well, I guess we'll go ahead and sign off. We went 90 minutes strong, which I think is what we were kind of aiming for.
Yeah.
And it's been great catching up with you.
Excited to see you in a few weeks, several weeks.
Yeah, about 2 months, and hopefully by then you'll accept my Carlos Rodon trade. And
give me a number.
You give me a number.
You give me a number.
I gave you a number. It's in the chat, or it's in our chat. What did I say? You said, well, I'm not going to mention that player's name. I guess I didn't give you a number. I just said, would you like to buy back Rodon?
You gave me a number for Ozuna.
I'll give you a number. I'll send it to you once I've determined the number that I would go for. He had a pretty good season.
I've kept him in like 4 different strings through his career, so I feel like he needs to.
You're who I think of when I see Carlos Rodon.
For sure. As a rookie, right out of NC State, 5 years later when he looked like he was resurging, 10 years later when he actually did resurge. Yeah,
he's been in the baseball consciousness for a long time.
Lefty slider gets him hot.
I watched a lot of Yankees games because of him last year. All right.
Been there.
I'll see you soon, my friend. Cheers.
Later. Good chat.
Bye.
Later, viewers and listeners.